I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour, a place where photographers meet to connect, inspire, and create. My guest speakers have shared their images, their favorite tips, and a little bit of inspiration to help us all improve our photography skills. The schedule for upcoming presentations includes a lot of photographers who will spark your creativity and inspire you to look at the world a little differently. You can find the schedule at lindanickell.com. And if you missed some of the previous sessions, you'll find them linked to the YouTube channel. Tonight's guest is Egídio Leitao. Egidio's love for travel and nature pair perfectly and make wonderful subjects for his photography. His camera allows him to document the places he visits and the things that catch his attention. A native of Brazil, Egidio has called Texas home for over 40 years, and during that time, he's covered a lot of Texas on his bike and in his hiking boots. If you're on Instagram, you can find him at Egidio TX or through his website, egidio.photography, where you can subscribe to his newsletter through Brazilian Eyes. In tonight's presentation, Travel and Nature, My Ongoing Journey in Photography, Egidio will share some of his favorite travel and nature images from national parks, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and places not too far from his home base. Egidio, welcome to the Happiness Hour as a speaker.
Well, thank you, Linda. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I am so thrilled.
I'm more thrilled because you've been an attendee, and you're a perfect example of what can happen when you show up at these things enough times where I'm like, Egidio, why don't you do a presentation for our group? And he didn't say no. So take note, Christy from New Jersey, Ashley Campbell, I'm coming after you ladies. So
take note. Don't go to lunch with Linda because that's how it started.
Hey, well, okay, let's go backwards. You invited me.
Yes.
You laid your own trap. So that's your own
I know.
But I'm happy that you're
I'm the one
here.
to blame.
You are, but I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy that you're willing to share all the travels that you've done. And I'm hoping that some of these pictures will kind of kickstart other people dreaming about traveling a little bit more this year. And hopefully you'll show me some images that I have been dreaming about myself. So that'll kind of spur me to think about adding them to my list. So, all right,
Okay.
with that, I'll let you take over the screen.
Okay, well, again, thanks, Linda, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I would be remiss if I didn't mention first and foremost that the Happiness Hour has been a tremendous help to my photography. I mean, I've learned a lot from these meetings. I've met incredible photographers, became friends with some of them, and we go on walks and we learn a lot together. It's really been very helpful. Well, travel and nature, of course, as Linda was pointing out, are substantial components to my photography journey. I like traveling near and far. It doesn't matter. As long as I'm out of the house, it's fine. And here's a little introduction about how this all came about. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit, give a brief introduction about my beginnings and talk about what I do with old images because I've been photographing for quite some time. And my evolution from 1.3 megapixel cameras on and on and on. And then some of the foreign travel that we have done. And of course, in these foreign travels, there is always a lot of cityscapes tied into landscapes, but it all combined. And we visit some UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And of course, preservation is always in my mind too when we are in these places. Seen quite a bit. I don't know if you're familiar with the map here, but here's South America, and Brazil, and my hometown is over there on the corner, Fortaleza. I was born in that town. I grew up there. It's in the northeast of Brazil, and it's a small town to Brazilian standards, but it has a little over 2 million people now. Because it is located on the northeast coast of Brazil, I mean, we have sunshine all year round. The city is only about 300 miles south of the equator, so the temperature is about the same every single day of the year. The sun rises at 5:30 in the morning, the sun sets at 5:30 in the afternoon. Temperatures range from maybe low 60s at the most and to mid 80s. But because of that proximity to the equator, temperatures, the sun feels very hot because we're very direct with the equator. The ocean breeze, on the other hand, keeps things cool. And luckily, it is not humid at all. That's a very good blessing. Because it's on the coast, the city life revolves around the ocean. Whether it is day or night, you can find things to do every single day, people spending time on the ocean, or just simply watching sunsets, or, just there's a lot of restaurants and all that. So that's just a little bit there. Where does my journey actually begin in all of this? I don't know how many of you have seen this, but I'm dating myself here. That was the first camera that we got. It was in high school, and my parents bought this Kodak Instamatic. And what was so peculiar about it was this little flash bulb that you would attach on top, and you could take 4 flash pictures with it. And that was the first camera we had, and it served. I remember reading the manual. It actually came with a manual, and it taught me the first things about photography. Now, this is outside my hometown. This is a dam that was built in the 1990s, but somewhere under the water, there is an island. And that island is where I spent a great portion of my childhood. One of my uncles lived on the island, and we used to spend summers there. And by saying we, I mean my extended family. In Latin America, your cousins are almost like brothers. But it was there in this area where I had the first real contact with nature. Nature somehow nowadays connects me to my roots and to my family. Then later on, after that Kodak camera, my parents got us an Olympus Trip 35 camera. This is all film camera. The neat thing about this camera is that it would double the number of photos that you could get in a roll of film. So if you bought a roll of 12 images, you could get about 24, 25 images. It was a very neat camera, and that camera lasted a long time, all the way to when I got to college. Then I moved to the US in 1981, and living away from home kind of sparked this interest. I wanted to share with my family and friends back there what I was doing here. So travel photography began to emerge. And at that time, every trip that I made, I would make a printed album and I would send it to Brazil, so my family could take a look at what I've been spending time here when I was not in school. Of course, the problem with some of those images, I still have some of those images, is a lot of them were taken with cameras that were only like 1.3 megapixel. And nowadays, I always ask myself, well, what do I do with all those old images? Well, the answer is very simple. old and small images nowadays, thanks to artificial intelligence, you can do a lot with them. Now, my workflow, and some of you may already do this, but my workflow is, first thing I do with a node image is I apply denoise to remove any noise that might be in those old images. After that, I then enhance or upscale the image to the number of pixels that will be better to work with. And the reason I do all of that is because I don't want to add any artifacts by editing the image and only in the end applying denoise. Then chances are I will add a lot of artifacts that way. So I always I do denoise, I upscale the image to a size that is manageable, and then I do my edits. And in the end, depending on the kind of image, I may apply sharpening if necessary using another outside software. So here are some images that were taken with that 1.3 megapixel camera nearly 20 years ago. This is the Santa Elena Canyon in Big Bend National Park. If you get to the bottom, all the way to the end of the trail, and this is one of the most peaceful places in the park, and it's one that I go back every single time we go to Big Bend. We always go to Santa Elena because it is absolutely a stunning place to be. Very quiet. Another one that was taken nearly 20 years ago, this is Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska. At that point, the camera that I was using was a 1.3 3x optical zoom. It was an Olympus Camedia C900 zoom. It was a very nice photo. I was able to travel quite a bit with it, very compact, and served a good purpose. Another one that I did with that, this one shows a little bit more aging too. This is one of the travels that we did. Every time that we traveled to Brazil, we would always include a city that we hadn't been to. This is the port city of Santos. Santos is in the state of São Paulo, and the port is the largest port in South America, and the city is only about a couple of hours from São Paulo. São Paulo, for those of you who don't know, is the fourth largest or the fourth most populous city in the world. It follows Tokyo, Delhi, and Shanghai, and it's got about 22 million people there. It's a humongous place. But so we try to always add a city that we haven't been to when we go to Brazil. For example, Brasilia, the nation's capital. Brasilia is a very unusual city because it was completely planned from scratch. And the government decided to put the city somewhere near the geographical center of the country, so it would be close to all the other cities. But everything was from scratch. They built that. And the city had the shape of a bird. It has a front, a back, and the two wings. What is neat about it is that plan, that master plan, has been preserved, and each wing and each front and back is self-sufficient. They have their own grocery stores, their banks, their shops, everything. They don't have to leave that area where they are. Now, outside of the planned area, Brasilia is just like any other humongous city. It has just grown beyond proportions, but it's a wonderful place. If you like architecture, my God, this is a dream come true to visit. The National Cathedral that I was showing before, here's the example from the outside. Incidentally, this was conceived, the city was conceived by urban planner Lúcio Costa and Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer, who, by the way, Oscar Niemeyer is the same guy who designed the United Nations building in New York. But anyway, back to Brasilia. The cathedral, these arms that reach up to the sky symbolize hands in praying mode. And surrounding the building, there is a cooling and reflecting pool that serves two purposes. It is aesthetic, but it also helps cool the interior of the cathedral. And this cathedral holds about 4,000 people. But even when I go to cities, including my hometown, I always find time to go into nature. I love cityscapes, I love history, but nature is the place that I get all that peace, all the tranquility, and I can spend time and really recharge my batteries. This is one of the beaches outside my hometown. And it is one of those things. Nature is where I find peace away from daily routine. Another city that we visited when we were in Brazil, it was Manaus in the Amazon. The city is right by the Amazon River, and it's fascinating because it's a big city, but when you think about that, it's not on the coast. Everything had to be shipped in, like the Opera House. Everything in the Opera House came from Europe. Ironwork was from France. Some of the marble was from Italy. This opera house was actually featured in a movie by a German director many years ago, 1982. But when we spent time in Manaus, it was one of those incredible journeys because even though you are in the city, you can immediately be out in the jungle. And I mean, literally in the jungle. We did one of those walks in the jungle and we found this little friend. This is an Amazon squirrel monkey. And he was very friendly, but I discovered that the reason he was friendly was because we were eating watermelon and he wanted some. So he followed us for a while and then finally gave up when we couldn't give him any food. In that trip to the jungle, we were able to navigate in the Amazon River. And here's an interesting phenomenon. The Amazon River meets in Manaus, and there are two rivers. What you see here, the one with the dark waters is called the Negro River, and the other one is the Amazon, but in that part of Brazil, it is known as the Solimões River. Well, these two rivers do not merge for like 3.7 miles. The waters remain like this, and you can see and you can actually feel the difference. We got our feet outside the boat, and the guy was just circulating the boat, and even with the eyes closed, we could tell when we were in the Negro or in the Amazon, because the Negro River water temperature is 82 degrees, and the Amazon River water temperature at that point is 72 degrees. So it really makes a big difference. Another thing that we did when in the Amazon, we swam with pink dolphins. And again, they were friendly because we had food. You know, they would come to you, and we couldn't see how close they were to us because the river is so dark that even within 3-5 feet, we couldn't tell that they were that close. You would just feel when they rubbed against your legs, you would feel that rubbery and very cold sensation. But it was a neat thing to be able to be in the water with those animals. They are very friendly and quite an interesting creature to be around. Another thing that we did, and this was one of the most fascinating parts of the trip, we spent an afternoon in Brazilian people's village. And they told us about their culture. They talked about their history and how they welcome visitors. And they try to live in a modern world while still maintaining their culture and heritage and customs. So their kids go to school during the day, and then they come home and they live in these huts that are just open air and just with a roof covering the area where they live. It was an incredible place. We heard music from them. We danced with them. It was just an unforgettable experience that we spent that afternoon there. Another city that we visited there was Olinda. And this is also in the northeast of Brazil. And it is just about a couple hours by plane from my hometown. The city was built in 1535. And Brazil was only, when the Portuguese came to Brazil, was 1500. So it was 35 years later that they built this city. And what is interesting about this is because, as you can see, the tile work on the walls there, that's Portuguese. But a lot of the architecture was influenced by Dutch colonization, because that part of Brazil was colonized by the Dutch and the Portuguese together. So you got a very interesting mix. But Olinda is a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is considered in Brazil as one of the best preserved colonial cities. It's an incredible, beautiful place to be. And during Carnival, they have some of the best street parties there. Again, another one in the Northeast, and this one, to my other friends who are conservationists, this is a conservationist paradise. This is the archipelago of Fernando de Noronha, and it is located about 200 miles off the northeast coast in Brazil. The archipelago has about 21 islands, and the main island is very small. It's just about 7 square miles. And the people who actually live there, they're only about 3,000 people. This is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And what is really cool about this island is that 70% of the island, 70, is a national park and preserve. It is absolutely a dream to be in a place where nature conservation is so strong. We visited this island in one of the Christmas trips to Brazil, and it was one of those bucket list destinations for us. I've always wanted to go there, and it really did not disappoint. It being a place that stresses nature preservation was fascinating. While at the island, just about everything we did had to do with preservation or nature. Swimming with turtles or sharks, and they said that they were friendly, actually. They said that the sharks do not attack humans. They never had any happen there. But everything was very lush and very peaceful, and the city was very friendly. But because it is located off the coast of the northeast of Brazil, you also have some historical buildings, like the fortress. This is the fortress of Our Lady of Remedies. And this fortress it was built in 1737, and it was built to defend Brazil and the island. So there's the question now. To travel for photography or to photograph while traveling? Well, I must confess that my love for travel is a notch above my love of photography. By that, I mean, I carry my camera when I travel, but I normally do not travel just to make photos. So when traveling is what fuels my passion for photography. So when I visit a city or a national park or a state park, generally nature is present in some way. And here we go. This is one of those photos after I retired the 1.3 camera. I moved on to a 5 megapixel camera. That was a Canon PowerShot G5. Thanks to modern technology again and artificial intelligence, even photos like that. This one in Alaska, this is Seward, Alaska. That photo was made about 18 and a half years ago. So when I edited this photo, I first took it to Topaz AI, cleaned up some noise, and after that, I went back to Lightroom and did the edits that way. So artificial intelligence has been fascinating to recover some of the old photos that I've had. I've been really enjoying. Here's another one from Alaska. And Alaska was another one of those locations that I've always wanted to go because it was just fascinating to me there. We visited a lot of small towns. We did not see Russia, but we spent some time in Denali National Park and Preserve and just soaked in the scenery there. And we were lucky that the weather was very good, that the 3 days that we were there, we saw Denali every single day in the morning. In the afternoon was another story. The clouds would move in and then you could just not see anything. So by the time that I was with this 5 megapixel camera, I started to realize that printing photos was becoming quite expensive. It was time to move to a website. And that was neat because I didn't realize the impact that that website would have. I was making the website primarily for my family, but then people at work started asking me to share photos of our vacations. And so they were living vicariously through our photos to national parks, to cities, everywhere we went. So it took off quite well then. To date, we have been to 25 national parks. That's a little over 40% of the actual national parks in the US. And we've also been to countless other national monuments, national historic parks, national forests, state parks, so on and so forth. When we go deep into these parks, we are able to really connect with nature, like hiking the Panorama Trail in Yosemite. This is Yosemite National Park. This is one of those trails that, you know, as long as you move a little bit away from the beaten path, you find perfect tranquility and scenery that is completely undisturbed and hardly anybody around. That was the case, for example, when we went to visit the 5 parks in Utah. This is Zion National Park. Incidentally, I remember that in one of our visits to Glacier National Park, a ranger told us that a visitor generally spends only 8 hours in a national park. But whenever you spend more than that, and whenever you try to explore beyond the most common trails, you run into scenes that are just amazing. This is the Watchman in Zion, and you might have seen a dozen of photos or more of this mountain taken from a particular spot on the road. I remember that we drove by that bridge one evening, and I cannot tell you how many photographers were there trying to get a better spot to photograph this. Well, we did not even bother to stop. We went our way. The next day, we went down on a hiking trail, and we got to this point, right by the river. This is the Virgin River. We could hear the river, we could see the Watchman, and there was nobody around us. And I said, what more can you ask for? You know, being completely surrounded by nature that way and being such close contact. So it's a very good thing to try to do is, you know, try to go a little beyond the normal beaten path that everybody takes. Now, when you travel to national parks or state parks, you should keep in mind a few things. Holidays, weekends, spring break, summer. Those are not the good times to be in those parks because, I mean, we experienced that the last visit we had at Rocky Mountain. My God, on the weekend, they closed one of the roads. We couldn't get to some parts of the park because there were too many people. Holidays is the same thing. Spring break, if you're in Texas, do not go to any of the major parks in spring break because it's going to be a madhouse. I've been to Big Bend one time around spring break, and the lines of car near Lost Mine Trail was unbelievable. So it's okay to go the first week in March, the last week in March, but the middle of March is not a good idea. The same thing goes to summer. We went to visit the 3 national parks in Washington State. We were staying with a friend on weekends, and then on weekdays, we would go to the parks. Well, I remember hiking one time at the North Cascade National Park. We hiked for 5 hours without seeing another single human being. So that it pays off to try to do that. Now, here comes a decisive moment in my life, and this was back in 2001, first time that I went to Big Bend National Park. The moment that I saw St. Helena Canyon and the Rio Grande flowing there, that was a transformative moment for me. And I've been back many, many times. We've gone back the last 3 years, and every time the park is different. We celebrated our 25th anniversary there. And St. Helena is one of those places, no matter where, when we go, we always go to St. Helena Canyon. And it used to be before 9/11 that you could cross into two towns outside the park. You could go to St. Helena in Mexico, and you could go to Boquillas in Mexico. They closed both after 9/11, and now only Boquillas is open. And you have to bring a passport because now there is a real official crossing that you show your passport and you go from there. But when we go to Big Bend, we like to go with friends. And in one of our trips that we did that, this friend loved to drive backcountry roads. And we decided to go to Maris Coal Mine via Black Gap Road. When we talked to the ranger, he told us Black Gap Road is unimproved and not maintained. We have no idea what the road is like. And so we got to this point and we stopped because we didn't know whether we could go through and what was it like after that curve. But luckily we were able to get across and made it to Maris Coal Mine. The thing about traveling is that it's really a big bug. You know, once you start doing it, you don't want to stop. So as an excuse to travel more within Texas, some friends and I began an annual tradition to spend some time in Texas state parks in December. It was what we call our Christmas time. We would go the first or second week in December and we would pick a different park to spend some time. Like this Garner State Park was our favorite, and we spent many Decembers there. We would rent 2 or 3 cabins, and just in December, unlike the summertime, Garner is a very quiet place. So we had great time in Garner and made some wonderful pictures. Another thing, what happened to is here in Austin, I joined an outdoor adventure organization that used to go camping in Texas state parks around the city. And thanks to that organization, I was able to visit almost every single Central Texas state parks at least once or twice. This is Enchanted Rock, if you haven't noticed yet. At a friend's persistence, back in 2016, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation was having a celebration for its 25th anniversary. And this friend kept telling me, you need to submit one of your photos. You need to submit one of your photos. Well, finally, I decided to go ahead and do it. Why not? Nothing to lose. In February of 2016, the magazine would give a theme every month, and you would submit one photo. So in February, the theme was Texas rivers. This photo I had taken in one of the December trips to Garner. That's the Frio River. It just so happened that this photo was chosen as the winner for February. And at the end of the year, out of the 12 photos, this was selected as the photo of the year too, for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation celebration. Another photo that I submitted, and this was for the month of June. The theme was Texas Mountains. And this is Davis Mountains, taken from the CCC lookout point on Skyline Drive. As you can see, traveling in Texas, I mean, you can see such varied country. You'll find beauty everywhere in Texas. So we had this schedule when we were traveling the US and abroad, and it worked very well until 2020 when COVID hit us. Up to that point, we were able to do trips. One year, we would go to national parks or other locations in the US, and the following year, we would travel abroad to some countries that interested us. Whenever we did those trips, one thing that I like to do is I really enjoy the planning stage. I like to prepare the itinerary. I like to look at what we're going to do and get everything done. But we also leave one day free in every location that we go, because depending on where you go, you will always end up finding something that was not in your radar and somebody will tell you, oh, you should go do this. It happened to us, for example, in Utah. We were staying at a bed and breakfast there, and this couple that was staying there, every morning we were just sitting around talking and coffee. And he said, oh, you guys got to do the Schaefer Towers. And that was outside the park. I said, okay, sure, why not? So one day we did. So it's besides planning the itinerary, besides planning for some tours, guided tours, we leave enough room to do things on our own so we can enjoy unexpected and unforeseen discoveries. So all the trips that we do, there's always that dichotomy, cityscapes or landscapes, we don't know. So we always end up going to places that we can get the most of both worlds. We just happened to, we worked at the University of Texas at Austin. And because of our schedule there, we were able to have quite a bit of free time. We would have a long vacation in the summer months, generally 3 or 4 weeks long. We would have a few days during spring break, and we would have about a 2-week vacation around Christmas, New Year's, when the university closed. In addition to that, I would also do long weekends with friends when I went camping around Texas state parks. And my boss was very understanding and enjoyed that, and knew that with the pressures that I had at work, that was the time for me to recharge my human batteries. And so that worked well for the places that we go. So the first country I want to bring up here, and this was a trip we did in 2008. Yeah. A good friend of mine here in town is from El Salvador. And this one is the one that I had nothing to do. He planned the whole itinerary. And it was phenomenal. El Salvador is a very lush, tropical, and friendly country. Back then it was. I know they've been having problems now. But because the country is so small, you can be in the mountains, and 2 hours later, you can be in the ocean. And when we were in the mountains, it was just absolutely stunning, the flora and the fauna that we saw in El Salvador. This particular city here is Apaneca. They have the most beautiful flowers that I have ever seen, and butterflies everywhere. Even the light posts along the roads in the city, they paint flowers on those light posts. It was a gorgeous visit to be there. Another thing that was quite intriguing in El Salvador is, especially for me, coming from Brazil, where we have white sandy beaches, El Salvador has a lot of volcanic beaches. This is in La Libertad, and I had never seen a beach that was entirely covered with black rocks. It was fascinating. And what made this even more interesting is that at the end of the day, we would sit at the balcony in our hotel, and we would watch surfers. This beach is the 8th best surfing beach in the world and the best in Central America. So we caught quite a number of action there, just watching people surfing. It was quite interesting. Now, I was talking about leaving days off and all that. When we do trips, we like to get some local guides. Sometimes, like I remember when we were in Peru, we actually contracted someone right outside the cathedral, totally unplanned. But sometimes, like when we were in Italy, we used Viator as tour guides. The advantage of, especially in Italy, this paid off so much because the tours would cover historical facts. They would give us backgrounds on the paintings, on the artwork, and it would also bypass the long lines to get into the museums. So it's something that you can think of when you're traveling is, am I going to need some local guide? Or if there is a lot of historical and cultural things that you want to make sure not to lose and miss, a tour company is your best bet. But so I was saying Italy. That was one of those great places to go. And we had planned on going back in 2020, but because of COVID, we had to cancel everything. But Italy is one country that is the country that has the most World Heritage Sites in the world. They have 58 sites. It includes the historic center of Rome, Naples, Venice, and many, many other places. On the first trip that we did there in Italy, we visited all the major cities first. We did a lot of the local tours, and we got to say that we fell in love with Rome. It really was. We were in a very good location that we stayed in Rome, that we could walk to the Colosseum, to the Roman Forum, to the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, do the whole thing just walking. But in addition to the tours that we had that took us in the Vatican and all that, we had extra days that allowed us to go back and visit the Vatican again, go on top of the dome, and do things that were not planned. In fact, one of the things that we did was one day we just took a walk all the way to the Trastevere neighborhood and spent the day there. And in fact, that's where I saw a church that bears my name. I didn't know that there was really a Saint Egidio, but there is one. And I took a picture in front of that church. It was really cool to see that. This in Rome was one of the hardest photos to make. And if you've ever been to the Trevi Fountain, you know why. There is never a moment where there are not people around this fountain. Never. Late at night, no matter when you go, there will be people there. So what I did is, being creative, I said, okay, they have these large pillars outside the fountain. I climbed on top of one of those pillars. So everybody is below me. You can't see their heads, but I was able to take a picture close up to the fountain without getting any people's heads in it. Another place that we went, in addition to the big towns, was the city of Assisi. We really wanted to spend some time there. It was actually where we bought our wedding rings. And the Umbria countryside is absolutely stunning. It is gorgeous. And when you go to this castle, you can have a wonderful view of the entire region. It is so beautiful. I highly recommend you stop sometime when you go to Italy, go to Assisi. This castle, by the way, was also used in some of the scenes of Zeffirelli's movie, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. As one of those long weekend trips that we did, this was when Keith and I went to celebrate our 20th anniversary. We went to Puerto Rico. That was a fun trip. It was really good. We were able to get a lot of good food. We explored the old historical San Juan, and we visited this National Historic Site, El Morro. So between the food and time at the beach, we had a great time in Puerto Rico. We were able to really spend and celebrate our anniversary quite well. Then it was time to go to Peru. And again, I did all the planning for Peru. And from what I had read, it was recommended that we travel by land, because that way you acclimate to the high altitudes. A lot of people seem to get sick when they are in Peru because of the high altitudes. And indeed, we experienced some of the high altitude in Peru, like when we went to the Mirador de los Andes. This is the volcano Sabancaya. It's an active volcano, as you can tell. And the altitude there was 16,000 feet. The volcano is at 19,000. Anyway, when we got out of the bus, we actually felt very lightheaded, but it was very temporary because, they had already warned us what to do and this and that. So we were able to acclimate quite fast, and we kept going on our southern trip. We started in Lima and we went south from Lima to Arequipa, to Coca Valley, to Lake Titicaca. And in Lake Titicaca, we visited the Urus Island. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. This is in the middle of the lake, and it is not solid ground. The islands float. And it floats such a way that a few years ago they had moved. So now the people that inhabit the islands, they devised a way with some anchoring to keep the islands in place. But you walk on this reeds and it is soft and they have to replace it from time to time because of course the reed, gets bad. But the people are super friendly. And as you can see, they love to dress in bright colors. It's a great time to spend there. But a trip to Peru is not complete if you don't go to Machu Picchu. And we spent 2 days there. And one of the days that we spent there, that mountain that you see in the background, that is called Huayna Picchu. And Huayna Picchu is the government of Peru selects they only allow 200 people to go in at 8 o'clock and 200 people to go in at 10 o'clock. And that's to protect the sensitivity of the land there, because they had a monument on top of it, monument to the moon there. And we hiked this mountain, and it was not an extremely strenuous hike, but you are constantly going up. But the beauty of this is when you are on top of the mountain, that's the view you have. That's Machu Picchu down there. And it's that evening when we got to the hotel, I was reading about that hike, and I am so glad that I only read about that particular hike after we had done it, because the Outside magazine said that hike to Huayna Picchu is one of the 10 most dangerous hikes in the world. And that's because of this inclination. It's very steep, and there is this area that they call the death steps, and they're uneven steps and very steep. So you have to be very careful. There were people that were really just not walking down. They were just sitting down, moving to the next step, sitting down, going to the next step, because it is kind of dangerous. But so when you do trips like all these types of things, one thing that comes to mind is, where do you stay? Well, we use a variety of places. When we go to national parks, we love bed and breakfast. And that's because in a bed and breakfast, you will interact with other people there. And that's when you discover different trails that you've never been to. When we were in Portugal, we used Airbnb because we were there for such a long time, and we wanted to be able to wash clothes. We wanted to have a little more comfort. So we got an Airbnb. But when we were in Peru, we did hotels. And what happened is, as I was planning the cities that we were going, I discovered a hotel chain had a branch in each of the cities. So I contacted the main office, and to make a long story short, they booked all the hotels we wanted, and they gave us a 10% discount. So whenever you're going for a long time like that, check out if there are hotels that are in the same chain that you may be able to get good deals, because it worked wonderfully. We made one phone call. I gave the hotel person all our dates, and they did everything for us. I didn't have to call 5, 6 different hotels, plus the discounts. So we can't beat that. So 2018 was finally the year to go to Portugal. And obvious reasons, the Portuguese had navigated to Brazil, colonized Brazil. So I wanted to go back to where history had started for us. And I also wanted to read more and find out more about the Portuguese culture. And it's a very friendly country. We were in Portugal 29 days, and we visited over 20 cities. Sometimes we would stay very short, just a couple hours to visit a museum or a castle. Sometimes we would stay longer, but we generally picked one city, a major city, and from that city, we would go to different parts of the country, just around that city. The country, again, is very small, so it's easy to drive, and the roads are excellent, excellent. One of the places that we went, this is in Lisbon. We were very close to this area, so it was easy to walk around everywhere we went. But we also went all the way up to the north to Porto. And from Porto, we took a train all the way to the south of Portugal, to the Algarve region. And only there did we rent a car to start doing the drive the other way, all the way back to Lisbon, where we returned to the US. This is the bridge Dom Luís I. It connects the city of Porto in the back to the city of Gaia. And I discovered this from all sources, but Instagram. I didn't know about it, but somebody told me, said, oh, when you're there, you need to go on the other side and get on top of that monastery, and you have this gorgeous view of the bridge. And sure enough, we spent a little bit of time there. But the one thing that was very interesting in Portugal and was the time that we spent a day in Coimbra. Coimbra has the oldest university in Portugal, very famous, and it's one of the oldest in Europe too. But we were there just at about the right time that they were getting ready for graduation. And all over the country, the graduating seniors have this traditional thing called the burn of the ribbons. It's a queima das fitas. Think about it as fraternity house initiations with lots more beer. I was walking around with my camera, totally scared that they would spill beer on my camera. I mean, I was paranoid about it, but they spend the whole graduating year fundraising to build these floats. And the floats have a variety of themes. They can do political themes, they can do themes about the classes they took, they can make fun of professors that they had, but everything with a lot of alcohol, a lot of alcohol. When you look right at the foreground in this photo, you see all those little red cans, that's all beer. And there were more on the floor, you know. So, but the burn of the feet, the thing is their way of saying goodbye to the university years, to their college years. But they get completely drunk. There were so many drunk people on the streets. It was hilarious. Now, because of all that alcohol, in a city like Coimbra, for example, they get very concerned that there could be damage to the monuments. So we had a hard time getting, they have two cathedrals in Coimbra. They call the cathedral very originally, they call the old one and the new one. So the old one, they closed because they were afraid of damage. So we were able to visit the new cathedral in the cloister area there. But to give you an idea, the new cathedral was built in 1543. The old cathedral dates back to 1164. So it's but it was just wonderful to be there. It's great country. We want to go back. Now that I have been retired for a little over 5 years, I love going back to places that I have been, especially in Texas, that is not so far to go, like Davis Mountain State Park. This is Skyline Drive. I have been there several times and I have never seen a boring sunset. It is absolutely stunning. The clouds and even the last time that we were there, I think it was last year, there was a sandstorm and we went up there to Skyline Drive. Even with a sandstorm, it was still pretty. Everything was so hazy. But now that I have been retired, as I was saying, I have spent more time watching photographers on YouTube, following photographers on Instagram, and as a result of all of that, learning a whole lot more. I have noticed that my photography has become very essential in my life. And even through Happiness Hour, I learned about macro photography. I had never experimented with macro photography, but after I saw a couple of presentations here, I ended up attending a couple of workshops in macro photography, met a bunch of people in those shops, in those workshops, became friends with them and developed great friendships. And I can see when I look back at my photography and back then and 3 years later, I can see the differences. I can recognize how much my journey has improved. And that's an important thing that I think I learned. The key is, even though I follow a lot of photographers, I look at their photography and all that. The important thing that I keep in mind is that I should, and I do not compare myself to them. I compare myself to myself back then and now, because that's when I can see the progress that I have made in my photography. It's true that their photography really inspired me. So I can't help but I continue following those photographers and listening to their advice and seeing their photos and learning more from them. And speaking of learning, in 2021, I decided to take a 52-week-long online photo challenge class. That class was phenomenal for me because I was introduced to a lot of concepts that I didn't know. We were given weekly challenges. We were taught some basic things in Lightroom, some basic things in Photoshop, and it was good to have that challenge every week. And that was one of the things that I took out of that, like not only learning new techniques like what you have here, high key, I also learned the concept of embracing the moment, that even when you go to make photos with a certain intent, a lot of times it doesn't happen the way you want. So be prepared to embrace the moment. It was one of the most fascinating weekly challenges we had when we were told to sit in one location for 1 hour and take photos from that location, 1 hour. Well, some 40 shots later, I was surprised that after 30 minutes, that's when the first 30 minutes were just the obvious shots. And by the way, I use my backyard for that. But the next 30 minutes was when my imagination, my creativity began to flourish because I was beginning to look at things differently. And but embracing the moment is a key concept to keep in mind when you are doing photography outdoors. And that came in very handy when I went one day. I had gone to Balcones Canyonlands Wildlife Refuge, and I had gone just to photograph grass, flowers, small scenes. And when I got there and I was walking, when I go walking, I generally have my zoom, my 18 to 400 millimeter Tamron lens. It's a very versatile lens. But I began walking with that, and then I heard this humming sound, and it was very loud. Well, when I looked around, that's when I saw my first hummingbird moth. And immediately taking advantage of one of the things that I had learned in one of these workshops. I remember Jose Madrigal had told us, oh, you should use one of those memory settings in your camera for wildlife photography when you're doing wildlife photography in motion. Well, I didn't have to worry about what my settings on the camera were going to be to photograph this moth, because I had programmed one of those buttons for high speed for wildlife in motion. So I just switched it to that setting immediately, and I was able to take several photos of this hummingbird moth. So setting up the memory settings, if you don't have it, I assume probably almost all of you probably already have that. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, every camera on that little dial, they have these, generally they have 1, 2, 3. Well, I program mine. The M1 is for macro, the M2 is for portraits, and the M3 is for action. The good thing is that on the spur of the moment, all you got to do is just turn that knob, and you got the settings all taken care of. You don't have to worry about, oh, what is my shutter speed going to be? Because you have already programmed that for the kind of scene that you're going to take. So if you haven't yet done the memory settings in your camera, take a look at your manual. It's very easy to assign those, and they will save you. They will really save you a lot of time when you are on the field. In our travels, we have seen a lot of beauty, a lot of beautiful scene, but unfortunately, we have also witnessed vandalism in our public lands. And it is extremely sad to see things like this. This one was in Arches National Park. We went to the Courthouse Wash Rock Art area, and it's kind of hard to get to it, but people had been there and they were defacing these pictographs. And the park service says that once something like this happens, they can clean it up, but they cannot restore the art. It's really very sad that that happens. So they destroyed the pigmentation, and it's something that is totally permanent. More recently, this one was in Big Bend National Park. And December 2021, we discovered this trail. It's not on any map in the park. They don't list it because it is extremely sensitive. And in fact, you have to go outside the park first to get back into this area. Well, we were there, and 2 weeks later, I read in the paper that there had been some vandals vandalizing this area. It's extremely sad when you see that people go in and write their names and carve their names in rocks like this, where there's a lot of other information that they're destroying right there. So I keep hoping that we'll try to give more reasons for people to maintain these things, because it's for future generations. And that means, like, I have never posted any photo of this particular area in Big Bend, because I don't want to have to answer questions. People say, oh, where is that area? I don't want to. And so tagging responsibly on social media is another thing to keep in mind. We really have to do that. Getting close to wrapping up here. With flight restrictions and chaos in airports, we have not been on an airplane since 2020. This was our breakfast view from the hotel in January 2020, when we went to my youngest niece's wedding. But we haven't been to Brazil or anywhere else by plane since January 2020. Hopefully we will do some trip this April. But because of that, I've been finding places closer to home. My backyard, for example. It's amazing what we can find. Embracing the moment, going outside and just looking around, and you discover these little things that are there every day, but I don't pay much attention because I'm not there. We are lucky that we live in an area that is full of beauty, and Texas is a wonderful state to be, because it's so large and you have such a varied landscape. You can be in places like West Cave Preserve, absolutely stunning location, very close to Austin. And at the same time, you can go to completely different ecosystems, as in Big Bend, where you have the mountains and you have the desert in the background. So we truly don't know what our destination is at this point, but we know that nature's beauty is just a trip away, and it doesn't matter whether it's near or far. One thing that I will continue to do is I'll continue to be active in photo challenges. I find the photo challenges very helpful to help me with creativity. It's not a competition. There's no competition with other people, but you get to see what other people submit, and you also have to come up with things to fit the theme that is given. So I've been enjoying group challenges quite a bit. And another thing that has really improved my photography tremendously is the Nature Photographers Network. I joined it last summer, and if you're not familiar with it, you should check it out if you like nature, because it's a paid system, but it's not very expensive at all. And you are sharing photos and obtaining critique from extremely talented photographers, Dave Kingham, Jennifer Renwick, Matt Payne, all these people. You submit your photos and they will in a friendly way, they will talk about things that you can do to improve your techniques or your editing. It's an incredible place. And I'm really enjoying my time there. And I was lucky that just recently I was added as a moderator in the beginners feedback group. The beginners feedback is not only for beginners in photography, but beginners to the Nature Photography Network that want to learn how to navigate the site and take better advantage of what it has to offer. It is a place in this beginners group. It's a place for people that are a little bit shy and they don't want to post their photo to the large group, but you can obtain excellent feedback. I can tell you how much helpful it has been to my own journey in photography. I want to thank Linda for giving me this opportunity to blab away here and for y'all to listen to me. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have anything, and I look forward to following you guys too.
I
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you, Egidio. All right. Let me ask you to take your screen down. I've got a couple of questions for you. So, um, the group that he was referring to was Nature Photographers Network. And Egidio, I know Jennifer Renwick and David Kingham. I believe Matt Payne is part of that group. So, and I want to make sure I got the name right. It is Nature Photographers Network. And I
Yeah,
believe
naturephotographersnetwork.com.
.com. Okay. Yeah. So, um, I think that's one of the questions. Um, okay.
Oh, actually, Linda,
Yeah.
actually, it's just naturephotographers.network.
Network. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
it's naturephotographers.network. I was looking at my screen here to see what it is. Yeah.
All right. Thank
If
you.
you type Nature Photographers Network, it will go directly to the site. They do give you a 30-day free
Yep.
that you can
Yeah.
get your feet wet.
And David and Jennifer in particular are fantastic nature photographers, and their work is amazing. So
It
look
is.
them up. Matt Payne was one of our speakers when we first started the Happiness Hour. And Matt Payne, you can find him. He was a big advocate. In fact, he was one of the founders. All three of those people were part of the group that started Nature First. So you can find them. I believe it's naturefirst.org.
Yeah.
Look them up as
Yeah,
well.
it is.
All right. Couple of questions. We're going to talk about when you start using denoise. Jamie's curious. Do you find that you use denoise first, then you sharpen, or do you apply both in your processing? What's your workflow on that?
I generally just denoise. I do not like to sharpen right away because again, if I'm going to be doing further edits, it may end up creating artifacts and the image looks funky. So I generally leave the sharpening as a last thing. After I do everything, I can then run again through Topaz to just sharpen it if I feel that there is a need.
Okay. And then Ashley, when you were talking about your 52-week challenge class, was that online or was that a group? How did you?
It's online. Yeah, it's online, Ashley. This is the group is the photographer that does this course. His name is Ricky Tims, Tims, and he does the 52-week challenge, and it's all online. What happens on Sundays? You get an email that tells you what the challenge for the week is. And there is normally a video that he talks about what is expected. He gives examples, and then he gives you a handout, and then you go on your own, and you just try to get the best for the shot that covers for that area. I created it last year because of that group. I created an email list, and the email list is growing now because we are no longer in that group, but it's basically the group is for photo challenges. And by that is to cover whatever issues we have. You know, oh, I'm stuck, I can't get this updated, or a lot of it is very elementary type of thing, people not being very familiar with Lightroom, but having so many people together, we have an option to help each other that way. But yeah, the class is from Rick. If you want, send me a note and I can send you the link to his page, and you can see he does this every year.
Egidio, I will definitely give you a copy of the chat because there were a lot of nice comments in here. I didn't expect anything less from this group. You've got a lot of people that are rooting for you in this room. This is one of the reasons that, I'm going to pick you guys off one at a time to get in here, because it's not just about there's some professional photographers like Valerie that, that's what she does for a living. But I think that the small stories of the works that, that you're doing, it's not when I say small story, I mean, these are my friends sharing their work and taking us to places that I've never been to. And yes, I've been following you on Instagram, but I haven't seen about 80% of the photos that you put in this presentation. And that was just kind of fun to see where you started and where you are and where you're going, because you're not done. But what was funny was, when you showed the little flash cube, a lot of people got excited because we're all dating ourselves. I don't remember the flash cubes, but I remember aunts had them. But those are photography. You've been doing it for so long. So long. It's a part of your it's a part of your life. It's part of your everyday. And I was talking to Barbara earlier this afternoon, and we're just kind of talking about inspiration and trying to find things to get excited about. So it's really hard sometimes where we get in this little rut and nothing really sparks our, creativity, or I get a little lazy about pulling out my camera. So thank you for kind of nudging us and reminding us there's so much more to photograph, and not just in our backyards, but it does help us kind of start thinking about a trip, even if it's just
Well,
a local park.
and Linda, one thing that happens too is that we tend to start photographing just one specific things because that's the kind of thing we like. But it is so nice when we go outside the normal range of things that we enjoy doing. You saw the photo that Mika posted today from the walk we had when Valerie was here.
Right.
It's amazing to photograph architecture.
Well, and when I saw that picture, if y'all aren't following Mika, it's Mika.Geiger, I think is her Instagram. You can correct, it might be in the chat, but Mika is known for her macro photography. It's all about the bugs and the furry little things that she gets right up and personal and in their face. But when that photo that she posted today slipped into my feed, I just kind of went, that's Mika's picture, because she put herself outside of what she loves doing, and went with a gang of this gang of photographers that hit the Capitol and hit those little areas in the city. And she did things that were outside of her comfort zone, probably, or at least what I've seen, because I've never seen her post anything like that. You probably broke up your Instagram feed, Mika, but it was just like, wow, she can shoot architecture too. So it's just, every time we go out with somebody, we learn something by just watching what they're doing, seeing the things that they see. And I give her a lot of credit and a lot of grief. But Valerie Hoffman is somebody that I have shot with numerous times. I even somehow managed to, survive a vacation with her on purpose. We planned a trip and we went, and it was fun to photograph with her, looking at stuff she got really excited over, like rusted and abandoned. I could not get excited about it. But the photos that I took from that trip, I was like, those are pretty cool. It's not something I seek out, but every time we go out, we learn something. And every time we let somebody new into our little circle of people we photograph with, we make ourselves get out of that comfort zone and try something that we wouldn't normally try, because I'm pretty resistant to a lot of things. I like what I like, but when I do go out with other people, I just stop and go, this is a learning opportunity. So you got to open
It's
yourself.
a different set of eyes. The way I look at it, sometimes it's a different set of eyes, because you get so used to looking at things a certain way. And when you have a different person next to you, even if you're photographing the same thing, that person is seeing it from a different angle, and you can learn something.
I learn something every time, even though I hate admitting it, Valerie Hoffman, but I do adore her. All right, Egidio, you did good, my friend. You did really good. I had no doubt. And I think, I hate to admit this on a recording, but Peru has never been on my list. It just never has been something I'm curious about. And everyone says, what is wrong with you? Peru is everything and more. And some of the photos that you showed in your presentation, like, well, wait a minute, I've not seen it from that angle. And maybe I'm a little nervous about the altitude problems that I would probably have, but okay, I might consider adding it to my list. But it was fun to take a little trip with you. And
Thank
thank you. And thankfully, I didn't have to hike any of that stuff with you, but
Thank you.
those hikes. All right, Egidio. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed his presentation. And please, before I turn off the recording, throw a note in there and say thank you, and maybe let him know what really resonated with you. Next week, Karen Riley returns to talk about the app called Canva. I've known Karen for years, and I'm going to tell you, when Canva came into her life, it was part of our conversation just about every time I saw her, but she loves it. And she's going to show us how to create a presentation, a video, and maybe an Instagram reel in her session. So our session's called Canva, Extremely Helpful and User-Friendly. And Karen's going to make it really something that we can all do and try. So until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.